Babu beep boo. What? Vincent? Oh, that's crazy, guys. Vincent's like, wow. Right. No, commented. The fuck? Okay, let me just do this. Station. Pass is it? Miss pass. Bigger banker. Contract. Gets the ball. That's a foul. That's spa. That's a yellow. Alright, let me just say. Who's this? Ooh, Kondraki gets the ball. First corner. Kondraki. Kondraki. Nobody play. Oh my god, that's crazy, chat. But this shit boring, bro. This is so boring. Oh! Oh, he missed. Wow, guys, it's the quarter attack. Wow, guys. Like this. Vincent. Vincent possesses the ball, passes it to Taco. The guy now trying to find the opening. Can he find it? Oh, he finds Mac. What the dumb claim? Why did he do that for? Ooh, there's a bad pass. Who's that? Li Chu gets the ball. She plays it through the Taishan. There's a 3-on-3 attack here. Oh, he got reached. Jan. It's offside. Who's this? Okay, cool. Oh, it's Kondraki. Kondraki against Kai. What? Yo, that's crazy. Bro, Vincent. This is the guy. Kai. Oh, man. To Vivek. To Miu. Back is open. This is the G. That's. What is that? Okay. What the what? How is he gets that, you know? Oh wow. Ah. Yeah, good one. One. What is this? Wafer. Where this all this Thailand come from? Thai. Alright, go. No. Oh my god, he touched the ball. Oh, that's crazy. Wow. Oh, Vincent attacking in Asia, bro. That's crazy. Is that not crazy, guys? Is that not crazy? Oh, what? This is horrible, bro. This game is so ass. This game is so ass, bro. Oh my god, bug. Bug order, bro. Passes it to the wing. Okay. Teko tak Oiki. Oh, Vincent gets the ball. Yeah, I got nothing, bro. Shoot, bro. Shoot, bro. Shoot. This Vincent.
Similarly to what he did in the midfield diamond in his first season at Madrid. But unlike that first season, where Bellingham was splitting Mbappe and Vinicius, Carrera's being withdrawn.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Kilish 5-5. He got warning as a yellow. Ref. It's Big Bang.
Going over.
Okay, we're gonna go from
Ladies, the new.
everybody's feeling the most
Enemy. Oh, it's me. To Vince, please come. Oh my god. This is Kondraki. Oh my god. Bugger of Destroyer. He's gonna miss 3, 2, 1 sky. Oh no, this goal. It's a lucky shot anyways. That's all luck. Okay, let's watch this.
Nico drop. This video is titled. She's legal. Even if she was 18. Yeah. Technically, from a legality standpoint, she's legal. And let me be clear, not my cup of tea. I like bitches with mistakes. You know what I mean? I want some mileage on a bitch. You know what I mean? Some stretch marks, maybe a bullet wound, some regrets, you know, some father issues. I don't want no pristine young bitch. But again, she's legal. And here's the thing. You know, black people, we had this selective outrage where it's like, if he's happy and she's happy, as icky as it may be, these are two adults who are happy, if they're happy and that's what they want to do. And I go, where is the selective outrage from the white community when Bill Belichick, who's 73, has a 20-year-old, or Al Pacino, who's in his 80s, got a baby mama and a girlfriend?
Yeah, he's a megastar. You're trying to make it. All you gotta do is suck a dick.
What?
Everybody's gay but me.
Yeah, and me too. Because people were like, they're like, he was just a kid when he gave head to his cousin. He didn't know. He's probably being abused himself. And I'm like, well, I started watching porn around the same age, around 14 or so. That's when I first started watching porn. And I could tell you with a totally straight face that it did not make me want to suck a dick.
But when has porn ever made somebody want to suck a dick?
Well, ask Kanye. Apparently made him want to suck a dick.
So he alluded to porn.
No, he said that in the song, he said that they found, I guess, some gay magazines and they started to reenact what they saw in the pictures.
Well, no, you're talking specifically about gay porn. If you're talking about traditional man on woman porn, that's a whole nother, you're talking about two different things.
Listen, I've accidentally scrolled by some gay porn while, going through. And, when you go on, Pornhub and sometimes some gay shit pop up and you just scroll
You just
past
go,
it.
click,
Yeah, you go,
click,
No, I
zoom.
didn't.
With
No
the click,
clicks.
zoom.
No clicks.
Okay.
Definitely slide up.
But when you slide up from one, there's another one, isn't there?
Well, you try to avoid them every so often. Every so often, the algorithm fucks you up. I
It's
don't
like
like to
you
see it.
said, nigga, I accidentally
I don't like to see gay
slipped
porn.
into a knife that stabbed me 15
I didn't
times.
watch. No, you see the thumbnail. Like sometimes it slips through. This is what I'm saying. I'm being 100 right now. Listen.
I ain't never heard nobody say that I accidentally got caught up in a gay vortex of porn.
I'm not saying I watched it. I'm just saying that when I go to listen, I like the premium sites like ManyVids and stuff like that. I'm a porn aficionado here. So sometimes what I'm saying is you scroll through and sometimes it's like a gay thumbnail. You're like, oh shit, I don't want to see that shit. Or a trans thumbnail. I don't want to see that shit. You go to hot movies and sometimes it gets slipped in. I don't want to see that shit. I think watching gay porn, if you're straight, doesn't make you want to do gay shit.
Say that again?
If you watch gay porn and you're straight, it doesn't make you want to do gay stuff.
This nigga's a homosexual.
You saying I'm gay?
Yes.
I've never watched gay porn.
Rewind that and say what you just said one more time.
Watching gay porn doesn't make you want to do gay stuff.
Watching gay porn. But why are you watching it?
I'm not watching it. What I'm
just
saying,
said
I said
watching
scroll
it.
past it.
No, scroll and watching two different things.
You still seeing it? You still seeing the images, right? You see a gay image.
I'm gonna abandon this conversation because I'm
No,
gonna get
I'm gonna
hypnotized
stick to it.
into
I'm
this
gonna
bullshit.
stick to it. I'm gonna stick to it. I am straight. I've always been straight.
But watching gay porn doesn't make you want to do gay shit.
Right. But I've never watched gay porn. I've scrolled past gay thumbnails.
Words are specific.
Okay.
And let's put them words together.
Let me tell you something.
Watching gay porn don't make you want to do
Okay,
gay
how
shit.
about this?
But you're watching
Okay,
it.
How about this? Seeing gay images does not make me want to do gay things. Have you ever seen a gay image? Have you ever seen two men kiss in a movie? I have. Doesn't make you want to go kiss a
Okay,
man.
now that's a little different now.
It's kind of the same thing.
Because if you see something on screen that
That's
you're
what
not
I'm saying.
expecting to see, and
Right.
it just happened,
Right.
like I've watched.
And that's what I'm saying. You
No,
scroll
that's not what you
past-
said.
You scroll past
That's
it,
not what
and
you
you see
said.
a gay thumbnail.
To the stenographer, can you please roll back to the court? That's not what you said.
Listen, man, I am so confident in my sexuality.
And I am
that I will let
too.
all this go. None of this will be cut out. It's all gonna fly.
Hey, man, words, man.
It's all gonna fly.
My business is words.
You and I have seen gay images on the screen, right?
It's
That's
the reason.
all I'm saying.
It's the reason why I
That's
stopped.
all I'm saying.
It's the reason why
you
I
never
stopped.
say, okay, you never seen.
If you let me talk, motherfucker.
Okay, go
It's
ahead.
the reason why I stopped watching Peaky Blinders.
Oh.
Everybody was telling me how hot this show was.
Gay?
Nigga, there was a scene where it just, unexpectedly, of course, I never seen it, where one of the characters goes inside, I guess a brothel of some sort.
Okay.
And it was men. And I mean full-on cock shots. And I went, oh. I did a Tony Soprano Italian, oh. And that was it for me.
Right,
That was it for me.
So this is proving my point, right? So you're basically
But
saying,
seeing an image unexpectedly
Yes.
versus, what is this?
never done that in my life.
Okay. You just said watching. But that's not what you meant.
It's not what I meant.
All right, then.
Okay, it's not what I meant. So all I'm saying is seeing gay imagery on video, expected or not. I don't think that Kanye's cousin like, hey, let's go find some gay porn. I think they would go through it. It popped up. God knows who was in that house to have those type of
But
magazines.
given Kanye's antics, and if this is really true what they're saying
Yes.
about the cousin,
Yes.
maybe the dude did say, let's go watch, and he said, let's watch.
But Kanye's the older one.
Either or.
All I'm saying is, okay, look, like we've seen movies like The Crying Game. You've seen that, right?
And walked out.
You walked
I
out?
walked out crying.
Look, we've all, like, just like the Peaky Blinders example, I've never watched that, but we've watched movies, and listen, there's been gay rape scenes. Like, I watched American Me. That's basically
I've never
gay
seen
sex.
that.
You've never seen it?
No.
That was the movie that made me never go to prison. That one right there. There's a rape scene
Yeah.
in that movie that made me say, no thanks.
Yeah.
I'll just be legal.
Right,
Thank you.
right.
That movie. Anyways, like I said, okay, so here I am. I'm in high school. I'm watching American Me, and there's a gay rape scene. Didn't make me want to go have sex with a man. You see what I'm saying? So my whole thing is like, he just wanted to suck a dick. Let's just keep it 100. At 14, your sexuality is sort of formed at that point. I don't think I don't think you could take a straight 14-year-old and get him to do gay stuff, without force. That's what I think. So the whole thing is like, oh, I see something gay and then I went to go suck a dick. Now you just want to suck a dick. And that's cool. Go suck a dick. That's your thing. It's not my thing. Doesn't sound like it's your thing. It's his thing.
Right.
And I don't think that was the last dick that he sucked. That's all I'm saying. That was the first in a line of dicks.
Yeah, we should parachute out of this conversation. Incidentally, did you know, I didn't know, I was looking through social media, Robert De Niro has a transgender
He does.
son that
Yes.
is now a girl.
Yeah, and he
So
said he'll love her the same way that he's loved him.
And I had a joke where I said, if I was his son and you were to say, excuse me, right? Like, say to me, excuse me.
Excuse me.
You talking to me, him, her? You talking to me, him, her?
Shout out to Robert De Niro.
Yeah.
Well, he has a new kid also, right?
I don't know. I
He's got a new baby.
I never even knew he had kids.
Oh, yeah. De Niro got a bunch of kids, but I'm saying he just had a baby like maybe, I don't know, a year or two ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, him and Al Pacino.
Yeah.
They both got babies.
Yeah.
Like in their 80s. Yeah. By the way, are you getting married for the third time? It's the same woman? Okay. Cut that out?
We will see.
Okay. Well, good luck. Good luck.
Thank you.
Shannon Sharp.
Here we go.
Let's go.
Listen, man, I got a few things to say about this, and I know how. Again, you'll be sitting over here wanting to, what they call that, double dutch your way into our conversation. But let me get a few things off first. Okay, listen. Here's the thing. I get the ick factor, right? He's 50, she's 20. I get the ick factor. Ugh. But my thing is this: what laws were broken?
None.
Where's the smoking gun? She's legal. Even if she was 18.
Yeah.
Technically, from a legality standpoint, she's legal. And let me be clear, not my cup of tea. I like bitches with mistakes. You know what I mean? I want some mileage on a bitch. You know what I mean?
Mistakes.
Some stretch marks, maybe a bullet wound,
Some regrets.
some father issues. I don't want no pristine young bitch. But again, she's legal. And here's the thing. Black people, we had this selective outrage where it's like, if he's happy and she's happy, as icky as it may be, these are two adults who are happy, if they're happy and that's what they want to do. And I go, where is the selective outrage from the white community when Bill Belichick, who's 73, has a 20-year-old, or Al Pacino, who's in his 80s, got a baby mama and a girlfriend who's 30? Where's the white outrage in the white community when Jerry Seinfeld, whose girlfriend was 17 and he was well above 21? There's the crime. Where's the selective outrage when fucking Mick Jagger, who's been around since the Cretaceous period, has a girlfriend who's 20? You know what I mean? Why we can't let our brothers, as icky as it may be, live? And then here's the other thing. So the big controversy is him saying, I'll choke the shit out you.
Yes.
Now, I'm going, well, listen, we don't know the context in which that was said.
Correct.
Now, if that was said on some OJ, bitch, I'll choke the shit out you, call the authorities.
Yeah.
But then she goes, I want you to put a big black baby in me. Now, if
There's a lot of racial play.
okay, but here's what I'm getting
Yeah.
at. If she said, I want you to put a big black NFL baby in me with big lips and a KRS-One nose, and his reaction is, white bitch, I'll choke the shit out you. If sexual undertones turns them on, again, where's the crime? There is no crime in talking. We are grown. There's not a person on this planet that has never said some wild, off the cuff, crazy shit to
Well-
somebody you want to fuck.
Well, okay, I agree.
And let me just say this before you go.
Go ahead.
If she did in fact say, I want you to put a big black baby in me, and he said, bitch, I'll choke your white ass, that's some sex I'd like to watch.
Okay. I agree with you, number one. Because if you know the way the court system works, it's cute to put out a little 30-second segment of a conversation, but if you want it to actually be admitted into a courtroom,
Transcripts.
well, no, you need the source file.
Right.
You need the original recording. Meaning that if it's a 10-minute recording and you just play 30 seconds of it, a minute before it could have been like, okay, let's do the racist cosplay that we usually do, okay? Go. I'm gonna choke the shit out you. Oh no, big black man, leave me alone.
Yeah.
Shut up, white bitch. And like, you know,
Right.
okay, that was good. Okay, let's try it again. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Which is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
You can sit here and be as racist as you want with a girl as long as she's cool with it, and then let's go along with it. By the way, have you ever done any sort of racist kind of bedroom stuff with like white girls?
No, but I got a great joke about something like that. Listen, it reminds me of that joke that Chappelle did, which is why he's so brilliant. He goes, if a white girl is sucking my dick and she says, when you come in my face, nigga, I'm not gonna go and take my dick back. He goes, I'm gonna bust that nut. This is no time for ethics, ladies and gentlemen. Like, I'm saying, like, come on, man. If that's what turns you on, you're grown. Have at it. Here's the other thing that bothered me. This is my last thing.
Go ahead.
Black people, I love being black. I'm proud to be black. If you white, whatever you are, Latino, Asian, be proud of who you are. But I love being black. If God said to me, hey, your next life reincarnated, what race you want to come back? I pick black every day of the week, twice on Sundays. That being said, black people, we have to stop this narrative that somehow white women are the black man's boogeyman. Because all I ever hear and read in the comments is black people going, see, that's what happened when you fuck with them colonizers. See, you fuck around and find out. And I'm going, and then they say shit like this, which is so stupid to me. Well, if I'm gonna get screwed over, I'd rather get screwed over by my own so the money stays in the community and doesn't go to the colonizers. So essentially what you're saying is, if someone rapes you, you take comfort in the fact that they put on a condom. Got it. That is asinine. That is the dumbest shit. Rape is rape. Violation is violation. And if you're gonna take my money, I'm supposed to feel good about it because it's in the community? No, I need my money touching my thigh.
Right. I remember Sebastian Telfair, he said something interesting. He said that divorce in the NBA is one of the greatest movements of wealth in America.
Yeah, in any sport.
Right. And
in entertainment period.
Entertainment period. And let me tell you something. These are not just white women with black athletes. There are so many black ex-wives that have taken their ex-husbands to the cleaners.
Come on,
to
stop
the cleaners.
Stop
You
it.
can't say the white women try to take all the money and the black women just say, hey, I'm just cool with a little bit of child support. No, fuck that. Fuck
Listen,
that.
when you're a man with money, fame, wealth, prestige, and position, the wolves in the woods come out in all colors.
Yeah.
All colors.
Right.
So, you know, this whole, I'd rather be fucked by my own, I'm still fucked.
Yeah.
I don't give a fuck if she got my pigmentation. I'm fucked.
Yes.
Get out of here with that bullshit.
Yeah.
And listen, when you try to paint this picture that black women don't fuck over black men, Desiree Washington has entered the chat. The girl that accused Tupac of rape has entered the chat.
Interviewed her.
Okay. So these things
I
happen.
mean, remember Robin Givens and Mike Tyson?
Yeah, entered the chat.
I don't think that he was very happy with the way that divorce went.
Come on, man. And you know what? The real challenge shouldn't be about 100 men versus one gorilla. It'd be like 100 Robin Givens versus one Mike Tyson. Who wins?
Robin Givens.
100 Robin Givens?
Yeah.
The thought with a bathhouse.
Yeah, I mean, look.
And I want to say this before we get off of it. And now I'm going to look in the camera now because I want to address Shannon Sharp's monkey ass. So, Shannon, you didn't want to put, at first you said you wanted to put me on Club Shay Shay. But then because of my controversy, you all of a sudden stopped returning my calls, ignored my DMs, and wouldn't put me on your show. But now here you are, draped in controversy. Moral of the story, don't throw stones at a glass house. We're humans. We all make mistakes, man. We all make mistakes. How ironic.
Look, me and Shannon do not get along. That's pretty much, out there. He blocked me recently, which is a little bit surprising. But, my history with Shannon is a little bit weird. So, but at the end of the day, I don't like to see stuff like this happen to people. But
I don't either.
Yeah.
I don't want to see another man go down.
No.
It's a soldier.
no, I don't want to see it either. But, with this came other stories. There was like a Fox story when he was at Fox that he allegedly choked one of the production assistants, and they
Was it a
settled.
female?
Female.
Oh.
And it was like a multi-$100,000 settlement. There was his ex-girlfriend who claims that he raped her. That white girl. He's into white girls.
No.
You know what I'm saying? But now you're seeing the choking thing happen.
So was King Kong.
He died protecting one.
Said.
Yeah. So it's one of those situations. I don't know. He had $100 million deal on the table. The fact that his own lawyer said that he put out $10 million to settle with her and she turned it down is crazy.
Well, yeah, that's very telling.
Yeah.
Yeah, or could be very telling.
And look, when you said there was no crime, you could say you could choke the shit out of someone and so forth and not really mean it and nothing really happened. But there are...
saying it doesn't make it a crime.
Right, exactly. But, for example, there's a text message where she said that, hey, you had anal sex with me without a condom and that's not okay.
She didn't know?
She said, this is a problem, and he goes, we need to talk.
Well, wait a minute. How does the dick get anywhere near the ass or the pussy and you not know?
Well, you could say we could have sex, but use a condom and don't do anal. When you take the condom off and do anal, then,
But again, you don't know? She does not know that he took the condom off? He got to take it out of her to take it off.
Well, maybe it wasn't on in the first place.
Well, but how do you not know that?
Listen, I don't know. I wasn't there.
The only person that can take a condom off while having their dick inside of you is David Blaine.
Damn it, I thought you wore a condom.
Ta-da.
Ta-da. Poof.
What if after he says, ta-da, she opened her mouth and she got the condom in her mouth?
Pulls out of her nose.
How did you do this?
What's Shannon Sharp's favorite type of necklace?
I don't know. What is it?
Choker.
I should have saw that. That got past me. That skipped me. It skipped me. I can't do a good Shannon Sharp.
Yeah, I mean, look, Stephen A. Smith, he went on Big Boy's show. He said people have been after Shannon since he did Cat Williams. They've been at his neck because of the numbers he produced and success that it had and how he was able to ride that wave. I guess.
The one thing that is disappointing, though, is innocent until proven guilty. So until someone is actually proven guilty, they shouldn't have their livelihood taken from them. Now, I know he said, hey, I'm stepping away from ESPN. They ain't stepped away. They told you, hey, you need to say you stepping away.
Yeah.
Because he ain't stepping away voluntarily.
No.
But
he was forced to step down.
Yeah, but I just think that until you're proven guilty, how can you take somebody's livelihood? That's fucked up.
This is how these lawsuits.
Or if you are found not guilty, then the person that said you got to step away either needs to rehire you, or if they don't want to rehire you because they don't want themselves associated with that kind of news and controversy, you got to compensate me. You got to give me something.
Yeah, I mean, who was the name of that one guy? He was accused. Hold on. Michael Irvin.
Oh, that's my guy.
Michael Irvin. He was in a hotel and a woman accused him of sexually assaulting her.
I don't believe that at all.
This was a while ago, right? And he was like, nothing happened. I think he couldn't actually work during the Super Bowl because of this whole situation.
Right.
It was ultimately proven there was nothing there. And I think he sued the hotel and so forth. She was a hotel employee and he won. I think they settled for some big amount.
Bravo. Let me tell you something. I used to fuck with Michael when I was doing Best Damn Sports Show. The coolest motherfucker on the planet. Michael Irvin is one of the coolest human beings on the planet.
Yeah, he was dope.
Not an ounce of ego. Him and John Sally, two of the coolest motherfuckers on the planet, man.
That's my man right there.
Oh
John.
my God. Mike Irvin's my guy.
Yeah. So this happens. Look, at the end of the day, I don't know. It's like there's certain things when you're a celebrity, even in the privacy of your own home with someone that you think you're safe with, there are just certain things you don't say over the phone. You don't text. You know, you have to. You know what I'm saying? Like,
you got to protect yourself.
You got to protect yourself.
Yeah.
You got to protect yourself. You know, like, yeah, okay, doing racist type stuff is fine. You know, if you and your wife are racist and you guys do all this racist stuff at home during sex play and so forth, okay, no one's going to give a shit. But if you're a major celebrity and you hook up with a 19-year-old OnlyFans model and you're saying this stuff over phone conversations, over text, you might be at her house. You don't know if there's a recording device there. You see what I'm saying? Like all that type of stuff. Like, you know, you just can't, can't do it.
Isn't it illegal to record someone without their knowledge?
It is. It is. But once that gets released to the public, the court of public opinion doesn't care if it was obtained illegally.
There's got to be some sort of, I don't know, man, retribution or something that you should. It's got to be something, because it's at some point the accused becomes the victim.
Yeah,
especially if they're innocent. That's foul, man.
Well, this whole Mount Rushmore thing has been taking over the internet recently, and you commented on the New York Mount Rushmore
of rappers.
Yes.
Yeah.
You said Jay-Z, DMX, Biggie. Well, no, okay, hold on. The original one was Jay-Z, DMX, Biggie, and 50 Cent. And you said Jay-Z, Jadakiss, Biggie, and Nas.
Yes.
Jay-Z, Jadakiss,
Biggie, and Nas. That's pretty goddamn potent.
All right. So let's take a look at this list. I would swap out Jadakiss with 50 Cent.
You
body
have
of work.
Fucking
body
mind.
of work.
No.
Body of work.
No.
Not even close.
We talking about talking about skills. We're not talking about success in terms of album sales or anything. We talking about spitters.
So you don't think that 50 Cent is an incredible spitter?
Hell no.
Really?
Over Jadakiss?
Jadakiss has more of the wordplay. I see where you're going with this.
Okay.
I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, wordplay, metaphors, punchlines.
I like 50 Cent as a rapper better than Jadakiss.
Well,
I think he makes better songs. It's not like DMX was a lyricist like that.
Well, some dudes
just made better songs.
Some dudes like to take a shit naturally, and you like stool softener. You want a shit soft serve doodle.
I mean, look. Okay, hold on. Well, okay,
Jada is hard.
You don't have DMX. Okay, I see what you're doing with this list. With this list,
spitters.
Yeah, actual lyricists.
Yes, bars.
Okay, I see what you're doing here.
Come on, man.
You're right. In terms of lyricism,
if you were talking about album sales and success, you can't have Nas on that.
Yeah, you're right.
Then you talking about Jay-Z, 50. Who else from the East Coast could you even put on that list? Damn. DMX. Who else? See, that's hard.
Hold on. Biggest New York rappers. Let's see. Well, okay, so you got Jay-Z, obviously.
Yep.
No one's doubting this one.
Nope. I'm not a businessman. I'm a business man. Come on, man.
50 Cent.
50.
No one's that Diamond album.
Yep.
Then it gets a little interesting.
So DMX is not on there?
DMX. Nicki Minaj.
You can't put her up there.
In terms of overall sales and impact.
And keep the women in the kitchen. Let her roll the blunts.
I mean, LL Cool J, he was a monster.
Pioneer.
Yeah. And went platinum and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Jay-Z, so that Biggie's not on this list. Because Biggie never really had huge album sales.
But he only had 2 albums.
He only had 2 albums, right.
Yeah. And you know, sometimes people want to discredit Biggie for that. And it's like, okay, but when you see the talent, the raw talent, that's like Len Bias. He never got a chance to go pro.
Yeah.
He died. But based on everything everybody said about him, yo, that motherfucker's cold as Mike.
I mean, people forget about Ja Rule. He was a monster in his day. He was huge.
Yeah, he made club bangers. You know, he made some yeah.
Yeah.
Now, is Ja Rule the greatest lyricist? No. But he'd make a banger in the club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he wrote for other people as well.
Right.
What about Prodigy?
That's Mobb Deep, right?
Right.
Do groups count as one, though?
Well, you could take Prodigy out of that because even Havoc will admit that Prodigy was a better rapper.
Okay, so let's flip it. Give me your Mount Rushmore of rap groups. Certainly Wu-Tang, Mobb Deep, Tribe Called Quest. Who gets that fourth spot?
I mean, there's Outkast.
They don't do it for me.
You just want New York. This is all you
No,
want.
no.
For nearly all of human existence, battles were destined to be forgotten. The prehistoric world preserved neither the names nor the exploits of its champions. In time, early written records mentioned warfare, but in sparse description. It's on the walls of a temple along the Nile, where Egyptians carved the oldest known detailed account of a battle in history. This is the story they tell. Word spread of the Egyptian advance. The pharaoh had emerged from the desert, and with his mighty army passed north through the city of Gaza. Now only a stretch of rugged lands lay between the pharaoh and the great hilltop city of Megiddo, where thousands of the enemy awaited him. The young pharaoh Thutmose III pondered his approach to the battlefield. The annals inscribed on the temple record that his generals urged him to consider only the safe roads, which cut north and east, saying to him, "Now 2 roads are here. Let our victorious lord proceed on the one which is satisfactory to his heart, but do not make us go on that difficult road." For Thutmose knew of the third way, the narrow pass of Aruna. It was choked here and there by jagged hills and vulnerable to ambush at its exit, but it ran nearly to the foot of the enemy's city. Although Thutmose had reigned as sole ruler of Egypt for mere months, his will carried the mandate of the one believed to be his divine father, the greatest god, Amun-Ra. Therefore the army filed behind their king and entered the treacherous pass. The ranks pushed together, disassembled chariots were lugged by porters and pack animals, and a scribe carried a scroll. He would commit to written history this campaign in a battle that would alter the fate of Egypt. The men were only days away from the Battle of Megiddo. Armies like those of the pharaoh were highly vulnerable to ambush when they failed to scout ahead and remain vigilant. Many of us approach the internet in the same dangerous way. See, I connect to public Wi-Fi often when researching for these videos. Vulnerability on the Egyptian throne. As Thutmose III was heralded as the new supreme pharaoh, the prince of a distant city-state called Kadesh pressed his advantage. Backed by a rival of Egypt, the Mitanni Empire, the Prince of Kadesh gathered many forces from the disjointed tribes of Canaan and Syria at the fortified town of Megiddo. From there, the coalition could choke off Egypt's access to essential materials, including specific woods to make chariots and tin for bronze weapons. The enemies may have further planned to invade Egypt to bring war to the banks of the Nile. Thutmose intended to strike them first. Until now, he had been merely a co-ruler of Egypt under the great female pharaoh Hatshepsut. Having been a wife and sister of Thutmose under the great female pharaoh Hatshepsut. Having been a wife and sister of Thutmose's late father, Hatshepsut was both his stepmother and aunt. Her reign had witnessed prosperity in Egypt, in its capital of Thebes, where she built the Temple of Hatshepsut. Over the course of 15 years, architects and laborers had constructed shrines and pillared terraces along the mountainside. A great causeway was lined with kneeling statues and sphinxes, and in the lower courtyard, gardens swayed over sparkling pools. Such temples may have pleased the gods, but they would not pacify the enemies of Egypt. Hatshepsut was dead, and the crown belonged to Thutmose alone. He swiftly raised his arm so that they would not pacify the enemies, and in the lower courtyard, gardens swayed over sparkling pools. Such temples may have pleased the gods, but they would not pacify the enemies of Egypt. Hatshepsut was dead, and the crown belonged to Thutmose alone. He swiftly raised his army, whose warriors had been trained by officers and organized into divisions. Pharaohs of this era would summon 1 in 10 men for military service, but many soldiers here had enlisted of their own volition, no doubt enticed by the prospect of gaining plunder, land, and slaves. Together, the warriors in the supply train moved north along the Nile in the spring of 1458 BC. The river had long traced a green thread of civilization through the Sahara. Each year, the life-giving Nile filled a wide floodplain and left behind miles of fertile earth. The people harvested abundant fields of wheat and barley, which provided the 2 staples of the Egyptian diet, bread and beer. Thutmose understood that this kingdom did not endure without bloodshed. Narmer, or Menes, was the very first ruler to unify Lower and Upper Egypt in around 3000 BC. A palette shows the founding king looming over his enemies, whom he's desecrated by placing their severed heads and genitals at their feet. It was some time after his reign that Egypt entered its first golden age, known as the Old Kingdom. These early kings directed the construction of the pyramids of Giza. They were built from millions of massive blocks encased in radiant white limestone. Grand causeways, temples, and the Great Sphinx adorned the surroundings. Although these pyramids were over 1,000 years old to Thutmose, life proceeded in Egypt much as it had a millennium before. People tended to farms and livestock, while priests glorified an evolving pantheon of gods and prepared the dead for passage into the afterlife. But this civilization felt different than it once did. Its power had been shaken. In the wake of a second golden age called the Middle Kingdom, the Semitic-speaking Hyksos of the Levant seized control of northern Egypt in around 1650 BC. The towering outposts of the old dynasties fell into ruin, and rich mines and quarries were abandoned. It was the Egyptian dynasty of Thebes that had stood against foreign rule. With a growing army supplemented by mercenary Magi of the desert, the Theban crown warned the Hyksos. "I will not let you set foot in the fields unless I am upon you. See, I shall drink of the wine of your vineyard, which your people will press out for me. I shall destroy your dwelling place and cut down your trees." Thus, after a century of occupation, the House of Thebes reclaimed Egypt and banished its foreign overlords. Now only a few generations later, an enemy from the Levant challenged Egypt once again, the Prince of Kadesh and his coalition. Pharaoh Thutmose III assembled his forces on the edge of the desert, at the old fortified outposts of Charu. This army counted perhaps over 10,000 warriors, each called to bring ruin and death to the enemies of Egypt. The mud brick fortress gave way to burning white as the soldiers trekked into the barren Sinai. So began the 150-mile march to Gaza. The Egyptian army had begun to adopt aspects of foreign militaries in response to the years of Hyksos domination. The widespread introduction of the horse enabled the advent of Egyptian chariots, which were lightweight and expertly crafted to maximize agility for teams of drivers and archers. Ranged infantry units, bolstered by skilled Nubian mercenaries, wielded a combination of powerful new composite bows and traditional self-bows. The might of the pharaoh still rested, however, on large numbers of melee infantry. These mostly unarmored troops carried hide-covered shields and fought with bronze weapons, spears, axes, and the recently adopted khopesh or sickle sword. Day by day, the troops endured the sands, their arid march relieved by cool nights in the desert. These men marched to war with a faith in the divine order of things, that there were gods who govern this world and the next. Upon death, hearts heavy with sin would be devoured and the unworthy destroyed. But the god Osiris would permit those of a light heart into the blissful field of reeds, for in life they had stood for Ma'at, truth, order, and justice. If any man should perish in this mission to Canaan, their death would come whilst carrying out the righteous command of the divine king Thutmose III. After 10 days of marching, the army caught sight of Gaza. Although rebellion gripped the region, the city remained loyal to the pharaoh, which afforded the Egyptians a night to rest and replenish. The city caught sight of Gaza. Although rebellion gripped the region, the city remained loyal to the pharaoh, which afforded the Egyptians a night to rest and replenish their stores. The secrecy of their mission had kept them safe until now, but their presence became known throughout the land as they pushed north over the coming days. The sturdy chariot units of the Canaanites and Syrians threatened to intercept them, but at last, after almost 3 weeks of marching, Thutmose and his force reached Yehem. 3 paths to the city of Megiddo lay before them. Scouts went ahead, and Thutmose called a council of his generals, saying to them, "That wretched enemy of Kadesh has entered into Megiddo. He is there at this moment. He's gathered to him the princes of every foreign country which had been loyal to Egypt." The generals advised His Majesty to approach the enemy on one of the 2 outlying roads, which were wider and more secure. They warned him that the narrow and direct Aruna road would constrict their formations, such that the coalition forces said to be gathering at its exit would overrun the Egyptians as they filed out of the pass. But scouts soon returned with more reports on the movements of the enemy, intelligence that seemed to strengthen the resolve of the young pharaoh. Thutmose addressed his army. "Ye shall hold fast to the stride of your victorious lord on that road which becomes so narrow." The intrepid king moved to the head of the army, and he himself led them into the Aruna Pass. Notwithstanding the dangers of this road, the hills would provide cover for most of the approach to the city. Indeed, traveling over open ground carried its own risks. For Canaanite and Syrian armies relied on heavier, if less maneuverable, chariots. Much like the Egyptians, the weapons of the infantry included bows, spears, axes, and sickle swords. The southern wing of this enemy army guarded the Tanakh Road, while its northern wing stood in the Kina Valley, the very valley that the Egyptians now entered. But their arrival was unopposed. Thutmose may have evaded the enemy by cutting north through an alternate exit, one concealed by the terrain. Regardless, for several hours, the Egyptian army streamed onto the plain. The enemy, having failed to block the pharaoh's advance, pulled back to camp as daylight waned. The annals relate that the Egyptians settled on the banks of a stream. Sentries were posted and rations given as a camp was pitched there for His Majesty, and a charge was laid upon the entire army. "Prepare ye, make your weapons ready, for we will engage in combat with that wretched enemy in the morning." At dawn, the enemy army arrayed itself for battle. Behind them in the distance stood Megiddo, the city so strong and well situated it was said to be worth 1,000 cities. Then the approach of the army of Egypt echoed in the valley. The annals recount, His Majesty went forth in a chariot of electrum, arrayed in his weapons of war, like Horus the smiter, lord of power, like Montu of Thebes, while his father Amun strengthened his arms. Pharaoh Thutmose III assumed his place at the center of the army. and together the main force may have moved on to the southern end of the ridge on which Megiddo stood. The tactics of the opening clash are not recorded, but a certain progression of battle would have unfolded. Archers deployed to the front, loosing arrows on the Syrians and Canaanites. The enemy answered in kind, before waves of Egyptian infantry crashed into the battered lines of the enemy. Amidst shouts and horns, men with sickle swords and axes hacked at shields and cleaved flesh. The chariots of each army roared over the battlefield, threading gaps in the battle lines and cutting down those in their path. The battle devolved into a massacre as the enemy began to break under the Egyptian onslaught. An inscription found in Nubia recorded that at Megiddo, My Majesty attacked them and they fled, falling in heaps. Thutmose had earlier sent a contingent northwest of the city to block an enemy escape in that direction. And so the Canaanites and Syrians desperately made for the walls of Megiddo. They left a wake of upturned chariots and protruding arrows, of hacked limbs and groaning wounded. But the Egyptians forfeited the chance to gain victory then, for it was written that their hearts became possessed by greed. Like crows, the Egyptians fell upon the dead field, picking and tearing away the possessions of the vanquished. The fleeing Canaanites and Syrians meanwhile reached Megiddo. The gates were shut, so the people let down ropes of garments, and it was recorded. The wretched enemy of Kadesh and of this town were being dragged up hastily to get them into their town, for the fear of His Majesty entered their hearts. Their arms were weak, for his serpent diadem had overpowered them. With his enemies still in possession of Megiddo, the pharaoh issued a new command. They would lay siege to the city. Megiddo stood high, and though its walls were of older mud brick from the Middle Bronze Age, they were bolstered by newer stone structures on top. In certain sections, the walls measured over 12 feet thick and 25 feet tall. Besieging armies of this age could chop and ram at gates, and rush ladders to the walls, but they lacked the means to obliterate such a fort. Thutmose opted to starve the city. He commanded his army to surround Megiddo with a ditch and a wall of fresh timber. Officials meanwhile tallied the loot from the battle, which included 924 chariots, some painted and others worked with gold, over 2,000 horses, the royal tent of the Prince of Kadesh himself, and human plunder, 340 prisoners of war, and 83 hands that they had proudly collected from the dead. Even the annals appear to note the exceptional detail of the records kept by Thutmose. Everything which His Majesty did to this town and to that wretched enemy and his wretched army is set down by the individual day, by the individual expedition, and by the individual troop commanders. They are set down on a roll of leather in the Temple of Amun today. Spring sweltered into summer, and still the siege wore on. Thutmose sent troops against 3 other enemy towns in the region as well. From time to time, hungry locals staggered out of their besieged cities, and the pharaoh pardoned them. He had not come to annihilate the people of these lands, but to demand loyalty, control of trade routes, and tribute. In the span of several months, Megiddo and the 3 defiant towns surrendered to Thutmose. The annals dramatized the subjugation of the region. Now the princes of this foreign country came on their bellies to kiss the ground to the glory of His Majesty and to beg breath for their nostrils. He took their riches, grain, and cattle, and then he took their power, appointing new princes throughout the region. It was said that when Thutmose permitted the people to return to their towns, they went on donkeys, for the pharaoh had taken all of their horses. Then the army of Egypt began the homeward march, with loads of impeccable treasure, nearly 2,000 slaves, tens of thousands of livestock, and a harvest of wheat. In Thebes, the long-awaited return of the king came with proclamations of victory. The city resounded in celebration and feast, attended by nobles, musicians, and dancers. Many followers knew the king by the throne name Menkaperah, lasting as the manifestation of Ra. The pharaoh was said to be the son of the supreme creator god Ra, whose authority was symbolized in a sun disk wreathed by a cobra. The life-giving throne of Egypt was to be defended in the same manner, with wrath and venom. The Battle of Megiddo had reasserted Egyptian power in the Levant. Now Thutmose was called to keep it. Rival lords incessantly claimed authority in parts of Syria and Canaan, so year after year the relentless Thutmose returned to smite them. He built a great fleet to rapidly move strike forces north along the coast, and he maintained a network of fortresses in the region. Megiddo was the first of 17 military campaigns undertaken there by Thutmose across 2 decades. The masterful victories brought distant commerce, the tribute of foreign subjects, and gifts from Babylonia, the Hittite Empire, and Assyria. Turning his eyes south, the king also gained control over much of Nubia. Many great rulers had sat on the throne of Egypt, but it was Thutmose III who built an empire. The likeness of his majesty pervaded his prosperous domain, while the aging pharaoh devoted his efforts to building great works and monuments. Yurts. Long ago, nomadic horse archers like themselves built the great empires of the Huns and Mongols. The Bashkirs will meet the army of Napoleon again in much larger battles. Steppe warfare will be properly tested against the firepower of a modern empire. The invasion of Russia is coming. In history, a society is often pushed to innovate when their enemies acquire powerful new technology. Well, now we've all stumbled into a digital battlefield. So take your personal plan today. Some 600,000 men follow Napoleon into Russia. They pass deserted villages and farmland committed to the flame. The Russians have left them neither supplies nor sustenance. After a vicious battle against the Russian army, Napoleon and his depleted forces conquer a smoldering and abandoned Moscow. The Tsar has summoned hundreds of thousands of Russian subjects to repel these invaders, among them a great multitude of irregular cavalry. These include the Kalmyks, a Mongolic and traditionally Buddhist people, as well as the Cossacks and Tatars, and of note are the fearsome Bashkirs. With the culturally linked Mesheriak people, they contribute 10,000 warriors. The Bashkirs patrol the devastated countryside, tamping down unrest. Some glint in coats of mail and steel helmets, carrying rifles and pistols, while many go to war with simpler gear, a cap and robe, and a bow slung behind them, with lances and swords at their sides. The call to arms will reach the yurt of a man named Jantiuri. Like other Bashkirs, he is a Muslim who was raised to ride horses and to meet his enemies with bravery. And so the Bashkirs now ride to war, asking for the blessing of Allah. Some chant a battle song. We shall show the Russian realm, we shall show the whole world that the hand of the Bashkir Batir, armed with hardened steel, will drench vast fields with the blood of French enemies. And yet, it is not a great battle, but rather a want of provisions in the looming winter that drives out Napoleon. In October, his failing army begins the long retreat. They drag through oppressive cold and snow, and suffer black and windy nights, their trail harassed by enemy Cossacks. The soldiers perish by the tens of thousands, while some fall into enemy hands. The invasion has cost Napoleon 500,000 men. Napoleon has not lost his resolve. Even as a new coalition forms against him and the Russian army marches west, the emperor reinforces his ranks with hundreds of thousands of conscripts and launches the 1813 German campaign. That summer, Jantiuri and his wife find themselves on a long and sweltering ride to the battlefront. Thousands of mounted Bashkirs trample over the land in large war caravans. Such mass migration comes naturally to those of nomadic and semi-nomadic origin. Some Bashkirs travel with their spouses as well as yurts, and every man brings a reserve horse for sustained transportation, or if needed, consumption. The warriors also draw spiritual encouragement from the mullahs, Islamic clergymen that accompany each Bashkir unit. Islam first took root among some Bashkirs in the early 10th century. The Mongols arrived centuries later, and the heirs of Genghis Khan scattered and decimated the tribes who stood against them. But in time, the Mongol overlords of this Western Khanate came to embrace Islam. So too did surviving Bashkirs, their faith deepening and language changing as waves of Muslim Turks settled in Bashkiria. And so, in the meadows and forests of their homelands, these Turkic-speaking Bashkirs persisted. It was the desire to retain these lands and other privileges that compelled some Bashkir chiefs to swear allegiance to Ivan the Terrible in the 16th century. Thus, the Bashkirs entered the Russian orbit. So it is that centuries later, Jantiuri and his Bashkir brethren ride toward Dresden in the service of Russia. At some point during the campaign, he and some 50 men are posted away from the main detachment to act as watchmen. They soon detect a party of French heavy cavalry. Arrows fly and steel clatters. Jantiori drives his lance through a foe, but the French cuirassiers begin to overwhelm the Bashkirs, and Jantiori is struck down by a blade to the shoulder. Jantiori recalls, "When I came to, I saw that half of our comrades had been killed and the rest were tied up. My wife wasn't near me and I thought she was dead. We were mounted on horses and taken as prisoners." Over an hour passes in captivity. Then the earth begins to tremble. A charging company of allied Don Cossacks appears. The riders rout the French and save the Bashkir prisoners. Riding alongside the rescuers is the wife of Jantiori. She had escaped the attack, alerted the main force, and rescued her husband. Still, in this age of firearms, modern units determine the course of war. Napoleon triumphs at the Battle of Dresden. Much of the victorious French army encamps around Dresden, while week by week the coalition amasses their forces. Skirmishes break out here and there along the front. Colonel Marbeau, a French light cavalry officer, demeaningly notes the presence of Bashkirs and Tatars. Our soldiers were not in the least alarmed at the sight of these semi-barbarous Asiatics, whom they nicknamed Cupids because of their bows and arrows. But Marbeau admits that the Bashkir raids succeed in creating controlled chaos. They buzzed around us like a swarm of wasps, flying all over the place and being very hard to catch. The attacks by these barbarians were incessant, and the Russians supported them with detachments of hussars to profit from the confusion which the Bashkirs could create at various points on the line. Most notably, the Bashkirs enthrall Napoleon Bonaparte himself, who stops on a hill to marvel at the approaching horse archers. The curious emperor wishes to meet them. Marbeau writes, "To this end I ordered 2 squadrons of my regiment to hide behind a clump of trees, while the remainder continued their march. The Bashkirs continued to follow the column when they were unexpectedly attacked by our squadrons, who falling on them suddenly killed a great number and took some 30 prisoners. I had these brought to the emperor, who after examining them expressed his surprise at the spectacle of these wretched horsemen, who were sent, with no other arms than bows and arrows, to fight European soldiers armed with sabers, lances, guns, and pistols. When we got back to the camp, my chasseurs amused themselves by giving wine to the Bashkirs, who expressed their joy by such extraordinary grimaces and capers that all the watchers, including Napoleon, were in fits of laughter." Though the Bashkirs provide Napoleon with a moment of pleasant diversion, the war is not finished. And to the Bashkirs, their continued wartime efforts hold great political significance. They had not always accepted Russian rule. Even as a multitude of Bashkir tribes paid tribute to the Tsar, they remained largely autonomous for 2 centuries. They wintered in their villages and migrated in the springtime, and practiced beekeeping, hunting, and gathering. The Bashkirs were spared the toils of serfdom endured by other Russian subjects, but their fortune changed in the 18th century. Increasing state intrusion brought Russian forts and waves of settlers onto their once communal lands. Their pastures fragmented, fewer and fewer Bashkir families would undertake the old migrations. Some would begin to settle into sedentary lives on farms. And outside of Bashkiria, the state impeded the construction of mosques and confiscated the land holdings of Muslims who did not convert to Orthodox Christianity. The furious Bashkirs joined several rebellions against the Russian state, but imperial armies crushed these and devastated the Bashkir population. It was at last the more measured hand of Catherine the Great that began to genuinely integrate them. She granted power and status to Bashkir religious leaders and promoted tolerance of Islam. In so vast an empire which extends its dominion over such a variety of people, the prohibiting or not tolerating of their respective religions would be an evil very detrimental to the peace and security of its subjects. The Bashkirs were expected to provide troops for the Russian army and organized to that end. For Jantiori and his people, the present war against Napoleon is a chance to prove themselves to Tsar Alexander and the rest of Russia. The Bashkirs are among the 500,000 men who will converge at Leipzig. There, on October 16, 1813, the Battle of the Nations begins. To this point in history, it is likely the largest battle ever fought. Guns roar and men fall by the thousands. On the 18th, Marbeau and his French cavalry are caught amidst the sea of troops. Facing a terrible cannonade and continual attacks, the French line remained steadfastly in position. Towards our left, they were assailed by a charge of more than 20,000 Cossacks and Bashkirs. With much shouting, these barbarians rapidly surrounded our squadrons, against which they launched thousands of arrows, which did very little damage because the Bashkirs, being entirely irregulars, do not know how to form up in ranks. In such disordered clusters, the Bashkirs awkwardly attempt to fire over one another. Their compromised aim prompts Marbeau to assert, "In fact, the Bashkirs, having no other arms, are undoubtedly the world's least dangerous troops." While the French cut down many Bashkirs, Marbeau soon faces their unfailing spirit. The more one killed of these wasps, the more seemed to arrive. Thus, one of my finest NCOs had his body pierced by an arrow which entered his chest and emerged at his back. The brave fellow, taking two hands, broke the arrow and pulled out the remaining part, but this did not save him, for he died a few moments later. Multiple horses and men are wounded by the Bashkir volleys. Marbeau looks down to find an arrow lodged in his own right thigh. The carnage rages on until the coalition at last wins the Battle of Leipzig on the 19th. In the coming months, the coalition forces advance into France and take Paris, while Napoleon is exiled to Elba. The Parisians are mystified by the sight of Bashkirs, plodding through their urban centers with bows and arrows and pitching their yurts on the outskirts of the city. Jantiori later recalls that the women of Paris were so beautiful that his wife forbade him to walk the streets alone. The eventual return and final defeat of Napoleon brings his era to an end. The Bashkir horse archers themselves had not significantly altered the course of the war, but they had earned the respect of Tsar Alexander. He visited Bashkiria in 1824, dining on traditional Bashkir fare in a village and praising the people as valued members of the Russian Empire. Passing through the meadows of Bashkortostan, the Russian writer Vasily Zafirov and his guides come to a yurt camp on the forested edge of a river. The elder Bashkir whom they've come to visit welcomes the travelers inside, offering them each a pillow to sit on and a bowl of fermented horse milk. He shares that he has a wife and daughters who are skilled horse riders. When Zafirov notices a coat of mail in the yurt, the elder laments that Bashkirs no longer wear this sort of armor, which he himself wore so many years ago. The old man is named Jantiori. Male in the yurt, the elder laments horse riders. When Zafirov notices a coat of mail in the yurt, the elder laments that Bashkirs no longer wear this sort of armor, which he himself wore so many years ago. The old man is named Jantiori, a veteran of the Great War against Napoleon. Dining on traditional Bashkir fare in a village and praising the people as valued members of the Russian Empire. Passing through the meadows of Bashkortostan, the Russian writer Vasily Zafirov and his guides come to a yurt camp on the forested edge of a river. The elder Bashkir whom they've come to visit welcomes the travelers inside, offering them each a pillow to sit on and a bowl of fermented horse milk. He shares that he has a wife and daughters who are skilled horse riders. When Zafirov notices a coat of mail in the yurt, the elder laments that Bashkirs no longer wear this sort of armor, which he himself wore so many years ago. The old man is named Jantiori, a veteran of the Great War against Napoleon. This is 3 hours of my brother Joe illustrating a Bashkir rider. We're just a two-man team. Joe manually does all of the art, editing, and music, and I do the research, script writing, and talking. If you want to help this kind of work survive on YouTube, go to the Patreon link in the description. Russians and their native allies made camp, the standard bearers of a new empire on the American continent, one that would answer to the Russian Tsar. The leader of these pioneers, Alexander Baranov, now led his company down the coast and founded a fort in the name of St. Michael the Archangel. Fort Mikhailovsky was to serve the fatherland as a vital outpost in prime waters. The Russians and their indigenous allies had tracked east for years, rapaciously hunting sea otters for the fur trade. Amidst islands of cold, trickling evergreens, Baranov declared, "Almighty God aids us here, affirming everywhere the glory of Rus. He shall create and further take American land that is useful to Russia." Their intrusion would surely meet resistance. It was 7 years since that dreadful night, the Tlingit attack, and only with the tenuous permission of a local Tlingit chief did Baranov now begin construction of Fort Mikhailovsky. A few dozen men of the company spent the coming winter in the creaking fort, cold months plagued by leaks, scurvy, and rumors of impending native attack. The coasts of this region were here and there framed by looming totem poles and great houses, the abodes of the distinct clans and lineages of some 10,000 or more Tlingit. This people had long expanded and guarded their territory by combat. As the Russian interlopers proclaimed the supremacy of a distant emperor, the warrior Kalyan of Raven Clan was not alone in his thoughts of armed resistance. Like all Tlingit men, Kalyan had been raised to endure pain, to seek honor in battle, and to repay blood with blood. The serene veil of mist which lingered often on these shores covered the movements of the shadow fleets. Tlingit raiders had for generations brought ruin to their enemies, taking plunder, captives, and vengeance. Lightly armed fighters might carry a bow and arrow, with their hair in a topknot, but the characteristic Tlingit warrior attacked in layers of hide, cuirasses of wood, and scowling helmets, charging with spears, daggers, and other sidearms. These titans of the Northwest met their greatest match against the equally armored Haida and Tsimshian people along their borders. Still, life in this region was not dominated by war, but by the coming and going of fish. The warmer months drew the Tlingit to fishing camps to harvest the bountiful salmon, much of it to be dried and stored for later in the year. They enriched this diet with other fish and fish oil, and collected crabs and mollusks, and hunted deer, seals, porpoises, and many other animals. And the approach of winter drew them back to their sprawling villages, where the people lived together in large, open houses, where shamans danced and chiefs and nobles displayed status through generosity and the possession of luxury goods, including jewelry, copper plates, and robes trimmed with ermine fur or puffin beaks. Commoners traditionally dressed in plaited cedar bark, fur, and hide, and toiling away were the slaves, often the maltreated, captured enemies of the Tlingit. These ancient ways of life and war afforded the Tlingit security, a surplus of food, and ample time for the arts. Yet what most worried Baranov was that the Tlingits were changing, adapting. Baranov forbade his men from trading firearms to them. As the head of a new state-backed monopoly called the Russian-American Company, Baranov had command of all of his merchant countrymen on the continent, but Russians were hardly the only foreigners to wander these lands. Spanish galleons from the Philippines had traced the Alaskan coast back in the 16th century, and after a 1741 Russian expedition under Vitus Bering reached the shores of southeast Alaska, the latter half of the century brought the Tlingit also into contact with the Spanish, French, and English, with whom they ambitiously traded pelts for iron to craft into tools and weapons. They knew already how to work native copper, and may have possessed iron in small quantities, salvaged from Chinese or Japanese shipwrecks. Whispers passed now between the village of Kalyan to the other coves and islands, a secret call to uprising. It was no longer the ports of Europe that strengthened these Tlingit, but the ships of Boston. To the unease of Baranov, merchants from the fledgling United States of America supplied firearms and gunpowder to the Tlingit in exchange for otter pelts, which were in turn sold to Chinese markets. Owing to this commerce, some Tlingit warriors now brandished American guns and wore armor made of Chinese coins. Day by day, this arsenal grew, and so it seemed a new kind of war would soon sweep over these lands. In the spring of 1802, a fleet departed the Russian base at Yakutat. This was a massive hunting expedition, comprising Russians and several hundred native allies. At the command of Baranov's associate, Ivan Kuskov, they moved southeast along shores that felt more hostile than before. Resentment toward the Russians had spread like fire among the old Tlingit lineages, for these hunting ventures had begun to deplete the sea otter population and undercut Tlingit trade. And in scattered instances over the preceding years, the Russians and their allies had stolen from, imprisoned, and killed members of the Tlingit. Now, 40 miles from base, the wrathful Tlingit appeared before them. Hundreds rushed forth with guns, daggers, and lances. In the firefight, the Tlingit feigned retreat to lure the Russians into the forest. Kuskov instead drew back to a defensible island. Both sides had suffered only a handful of casualties, but with his ammunition dwindling, Kuskov struck a truce, then turned back to base to restock on ammo and supplies. He had little idea that this was the beginning of the Great Tlingit Rebellion. When the chief of the Kiksadi Tlingit allowed the construction of Fort Mikhailovsky years before, he may have unknowingly pledged his clan to the Russian Tsar. It was now well known how Russian merchants regarded their newest subjects. Many of the hunters who sailed with them were the indigenous people of the Aleutian Islands, whom the merchants had colonized and forced to work as their hunters. Though the prospect of this sort of servitude stirred the Tlingit, they lacked a king or council to rally their many clans to war. The autonomous Tlingit groups nevertheless maintained ties through potlatch ceremonies and gift exchange. Each clan, moreover, belonged to either the Raven or Eagle division. The Tlingit were obliged to marry members from the opposite moiety. And so the old allegiances between clans were now called upon. As Tlingit men took up their armor and weapons, they sent entreaties to other indigenous groups, even former enemies, to join the rebellion. In June of 1802, over 1,000 warriors of the Tlingit, joined by some Haida and Tsimshian, converged on Fort Mikhailovsky in an unprecedented alliance. The Russians and their allies were slaughtered where they stood, run through with spears and riddled with gunfire. As Kalyan led attacking warriors through the fort, the defenders pulled back to the upper barracks, desperately firing cannons until they fell to the onslaught. The vanquished lay dead, and the fort became a pyre, around which the victorious Tlingit hauled away captives and plundered furs. The next day, a party of Russians and their allies returned from a sea lion hunt, and the Tlingit crushed them. The rebels, in their triumph, had severed the head of the Russian imperial snake in their lands. The grey shores of Sitka Sound, from the field of battle to the Tlingit dwellings, acquired a grave stillness about them. Before long, a British merchant vessel under Captain Henry Barber sailed into the region. Barber wrote, "Where the late Russian factories stood, I found the place entirely destroyed by fire, and mangled bodies of about 20 men laying scatter among the ruins, a prey to the ravens and wild beasts of the forest. More than 20 indigenous and Russian survivors of the attacks had fallen into the hands of the Tlingit." So Captain Barber, backed by a few American vessels, invited aboard Kalyan and his uncle, Chief Skoutlaut, under the pretense of trade. He then arrested and threatened to execute both of them unless their clan handed over the captive survivors and the furs taken from the Russian fort. Barber was not, however, a gallant rescuer. He kept the plundered furs for himself and held the prisoners for ransom, as he set a course for the Russian harbor at Kodiak Island. There he met with Alexander Baranov, from whom he brazenly extorted a haul of furs worth 10,000 rubles in exchange for the freedom of the survivors. Far from Tlingit territory, Kodiak served as a headquarters for Baranov, and he had thus emerged from the rebellion unscathed. His countrymen insisted that English and American merchants had instigated the uprising, but Baranov had long sensed a brewing anger among many Tlingit. He had taken pains to stop his men from plundering and abusing locals, and to keep their hunting expeditions out of Tlingit sight. Whatever restraint they had exercised had not saved them. Baranov lamented, "Many of our brethren, the bravest, perished together with many of our allies at the hands of barbarians in America." The profitable frontier of Southeast Alaska was lost, forever he feared, if the Russians could not retake the region at once. But even as official governor of the Russian colonies in America, Baranov found himself short of resources. Months passed and seasons changed as Alexander Baranov gathered hundreds of men and weapons for the reconquest. In early 1803, he wrote the men of his company, "I address you as faithful sons of the fatherland, bound to our monarch by oath of allegiance, and ask you not to be weak and ungrateful. Let us regain the lost hunting grounds, and by this we shall prove the essence of courage, not a timid but brave spirit of the Russian people." Kalyan and his clan expected the return of the Russians, and they would resist it with their lives. The clan stockpiled gunpowder and weapons. If the instruments of combat had changed, the nature of war had not. On clear nights, the Tlingit often beheld the aurora borealis, believed to be the noble spirits of fallen warriors, exalted for their bravery in the afterlife. The world, as the elders told it, was a place of divine mystery, crafted and imbued with knowledge by the raven Yeh. The Tlingit believed the creatures of the world possessed great intelligence and spiritual potency, and they held in high esteem bears, wolves, killer whales, eagles, and ravens. It was the Kiksadi Raven clan that would now look to Kalyan to serve as their war chief. The clan abandoned their village and settled on a defensible peninsula elsewhere in Sitka. Around their new dwellings, they raised a massive palisade, 245 feet across on one end, with gates and reinforcing timbers along the base and outside, as well as gun ports for their cannons. It was called the Sapling Fort. No effort could be spared in protecting their civilians. Only 2 decades before, fur traders under Baranov's predecessor perpetrated the Awa-Uk massacre of some 300 indigenous men, women, and children after the people resisted Russian settlement around Kodiak Island. It was now the summer of 1804. The fleets of Baranov, which comprised some 100 armed Russians and several ships, and many more indigenous otter hunters, began to cruise past Tlingit villages to deter resistance. They punished those who had been heavily involved in the uprising of 1802 and negotiated truce with others. The distant settlements of the Tlingits may have tenuously allied for the rebellion 2 years before, but they would not now risk coming to the aid of the Kiksadi clan. Those in the Sapling Fort would face the Russian-led force alone. Baranov assembled this force at the old abandoned Tlingit village, where he came across a Russian naval ship called the Neva. The captain and his crew of 41 men had learned of the situation in Alaska. Having recently completed the first Russian circumnavigation of the world, they came to join Baranov and bring military might against the Tlingit. Kalyan needed firepower to resist them. A party of high-ranking Tlingit men went out to collect more gunpowder and guns, but as they returned, the Neva emerged and fired on them. A spark struck the cargo when the Tlingit fired back and the canoe exploded. 2 days later, on October the 1st, the Russian fleet gathered beyond the shallow exploded. Fired on them. Men went out to collect more gunpowder firepower to resist military might against the Tlingit. Kalyan needed firepower to resist them. A party of high-ranking Tlingit men went out to collect more gunpowder and guns, but as they returned, the Neva emerged and fired on them. A spark struck the cargo when the Tlingit fired back and the canoe exploded. 2 days later, on October the 1st, the Russian fleet gathered beyond the shallow exploded. 2 days later, on struck the cargo when the Tlingit fired back and the canoe exploded. 2 days later, on October the 1st, the Russian fleet gathered beyond the shallows of the Sapling Fort and prepared to land the forces. The oral traditions told that the mighty Kalyan placed his hands in charcoal and smeared it in lines about his face in the image of a fallen raven, the war paint of a man prepared to die. His head adorned by the raven helmet, he took up a hammer looted from a Russian blacksmith slain in the rebellion and stirred his men to battle. As the sun sank low over the water, the Russians and their allies advanced on the fort, hauling artillery behind them. Tlingit gunfire began to cut them down as they neared the walls. Some of the attackers broke ranks and Tlingit warriors sallied out from the fort. Another contingent under Kalyan then rushed the flanks of the fleeing enemies in a scene of furious combat, shattered bone and pierced flesh. A fallen sailor was hoisted on a Tlingit spear, and Kalyan was said to have crushed several enemies with his hammer. The Russians and their allies fell back to their ships under the cover of cannon fire. Around 10 of them died, and Baranov, shot through the arm, was among the 24 wounded. The Tlingit had won the first day of battle, and over the coming days the strong walls of their fort withstood sporadic bombardment from the Russian fleet. But Kalyan recognized that he lacked the gunpowder supply to fend off Russian attacks for much longer. While in negotiations with the Russians, the several hundred Tlingit began to escape into the forest under the cover of night. First the elders, women, and children, followed at last by the warriors, in one long survival march through damp woods and cold mountain paths. Hunger and the elements took the lives of many during the retreat to Peril Strait. On the 7th of October, the Russians entered the silent fort and found it abandoned. Inside were several slain young children and elderly Tlingit, killed by their own clan, possibly because they were deemed too weak to endure the journey. The Russians burned the sapling fort and founded an establishment they called New Archangel. The following summer of 1805, they received delegations from the exiled Kiksadi Tlingit. An air of authority accompanied the arrival of Kalyan, of whom the Russian captain said, "He is considered the best shot and keeps with him up to 20 fine guns." Baranov welcomed his former adversaries and paid respect to their customs. Negotiating between days of ritual dances and songs, the parties exchanged gifts and prisoners, and Baranov traded a cherished copper crest for the right to settle the land around New Archangel. Grievances remained among the Tlingit in the north, who suffered hunger as Russians barred them from their traditional fishing waters and openly hunted otters off the coast. Tlingit warriors retaliated by swarming the merchant base at Yakutat. They killed all the Russians within and burned it to the ground. The fort was never rebuilt. It was a time of great change in the world beyond, when old empires and civilizations faced the prospect of their own ruin. Kings fell, Napoleon scattered the armies of Europe, and the forays of Lewis and Clark signaled the dawn of U.S. westward expansion. Yet here, in this modest corner of Alaska, the Tlingit had fractured a looming frontier. Although New Archangel became the capital of Russian America, Kuskov set up the next Russian establishment south, along the coast of California, far from the armed Pacific Northwest groups that disrupted his hunting ventures. The Russian-Native American wars in southeast Alaska did not end in true conquest, but rather a kind of negotiated coexistence. When Baranov retired in 1818, Tlingit chiefs came to bid him farewell, including Kalyan, long admired by the governor for his intelligence and courage. The 71-year-old Baranov sailed off. He succumbed to disease before reaching Russia. Russian merchants had extracted labor and tribute from indigenous populations in their push across Alaska. It was the armed resistance of Tlingit warriors and later advocacy from Russian Orthodox missionaries that helped bring change. Orders signed by the Tsar in the 1820s prohibited merchants from taxing or demanding tribute from the Tlingit and surrounding peoples, adding that Russian merchants were to use every kind of method to preserve their goodwill, avoiding everything which might stir up suspicion in them about the intention of violating their independence. There would be no wave of thousands of In an age where kings and other empires fell, the US staked its claim over a vast stretch of the American continent. The dramatic saga that followed is beautifully told in Kevin Costner's The West. The all-new 8-part series from history is not only the sponsor of this video, but it might also be my favorite thing on television at the moment. What I love is that in each episode, Kevin Costner, along with historians and other experts, present the complicated reality of the frontier. Real quick, if you're on the go a lot but appreciate quality food, today's sponsor Factor delivers meals to your door that are ready to eat in 2 minutes. My promo gets you sales appear as if out of the deep, with a burst of of guns, a tide of Englishmen pounds onto the beach. The Spanish flee inland. The English, having failed to conquer Spanish Hispaniola, have come to take this sparsely populated island instead. Spain had claimed Jamaica in the days of Columbus, promptly enslaving the indigenous Taino people. As disease and maltreatment began to kill nearly all of this population, the Spaniards turned increasingly to enslaved Africans. In the chaos of the present invasion, these Africans, roughly 1,500 strong, find themselves free. Spanish stragglers resist the English until about 1660. But the liberated Africans continue to fight from the shadowed woods. The Spanish had called such African and indigenous runaways cimarrones, meaning wild or untamed. The English called them maroons. After some years of bloodshed, the maroons retreat at last into the forested mountains, and the English do not follow. It is recorded that the ways of them became utterly unknown to the white people, and so they continued for many years. In the meantime, the Jamaican coasts become the haunts of buccaneers such as Henry Morgan, who murderously plunder Spanish ports and ships. Clergymen decry the Jamaican city of Port Royal as a profane and ungodly haven for pirates and prostitutes. The great wickedness does indeed enter through the southern docks of Jamaica. Yet it is not the dwindling ranks of buccaneers, but the foul blight of slavery. Withered survivors of the transatlantic voyage are prodded ashore, sold, and forced onto plantations. The enslaved population, which counted 550 Africans in 1662, numbers 45,000 around the turn of the century. Many die from disease and overwork in the scalding, injurious labor of sugar production, and this industry is maintained by heinous violence. One pro-slavery writer notes, "For crimes of lesser nature, castration or chopping off half of the foot with an axe. For negligence, they are usually whipped by the overseer. After they are whipped till they are raw, some put on their skins pepper and salt. Rebellion incurs the punishment of being burned alive slowly. And yet it is known by all that in the mountains there live those whose very existence defies this order. Runaways and the survivors of frequent slave rebellions have often joined them or formed their own bands in the wilderness. And on occasion, often in the quiet hours of the night, the maroons return to the plantations. They torch the estates, kill the slaveholders, plunder weapons and supplies, and liberate many of the enslaved into their ranks. For in the Blue Mountains lies a place called Nanny Town, home to hundreds of maroons. Elements of the traditions and tongues of the mother continent are maintained here in a kind of diasporic West African village. Women plant yams and plantains, and men hunt wild hogs, and their children are born free. The leaders and warriors answer to the spiritual counsel and wisdom of a maroon elder called Nanny. Her town, together with outlying maroon villages, constitute the windward band of maroons. In the west are the leeward maroons, under the stern leadership of a man called Cudjoe. Many maroons are from the Akan-speaking region of the Gold Coast, first taken captive and sold during wars against rival African coastal powers. Thus, the maroons are well acquainted with war. They traverse the Jamaican hills with signaling horns, brandishing spears or stolen guns and swords. When British planters expand around the northeast coast in 1722, the maroons strike. Plantations are burned and deserted. Enslaved Africans are inspired to rebel or run away. Maroon raids continue for years with hardly any retaliation. The British Crown sends regiments of professional soldiers in 1730. But the militia and military alike must face the mountains, where they flounder down false trails into traps, only to be ambushed by maroons who vanish again into the woods. Maroon warfare, slave rebellions, and a correspondingly torpid economy are bleeding the white population, already around 10 enslaved people to every 1 white person. At an emergency meeting of the legislature, the governor warns, "There never was a point of time which more required your attention to the safety of this island than at present." The British mobilize large parties against both bands of maroons and capture several settlements. But many of the slaves made to fight for them defect to the Maroons, who regained Nannytown in a counterattack the following year. The underground rebellion is all around the planters, in the trees, in their very homes. The enslaved listen and pass intelligence about British plans to Maroon scouts. The Windward Maroons, themselves oath-sworn in loyalty to Nanny, sense war. 400 troops, including 100 professional soldiers, advance toward Nannytown. One division moves to block the rear exit, but the Maroons ambush them and chase them off. The remaining 300 march on. The Maroons suddenly appear from behind trees and rocks, shouting, shooting, and massacring the front lines. The hysteric British fall back. Following this triumph, rebellions spring up across the island, and runaways join the Maroons in droves. The legislature of Jamaica concedes that the Maroons have grown in power. To the great terror of His Majesty's subjects, they plundered all around them and caused several plantations to be thrown up and abandoned, to the diminution of His Majesty's revenue. A planter writes that, "The rebels got the better of all our parties. Our men dare not look them in the face in the open ground or in equal numbers." But in 1734, a large British force quietly scales the high, narrow path to Nannytown and bombards the huts with small cannons. Maroons flee the burning village. In the ensuing skirmishes, Maroon warriors take the lives of 80 of the attackers, but Nannytown is lost. The Windward band disperses to other hideouts. Some make a long trek to Cudjoe in the west, but the prickly and vigilant chief will not risk harboring those not under his direct authority. He turns them back. And for years there is quiet, the planters recovering some sense of security, until the Windward Maroons resume the fight in 1737. The British, possessing neither the means nor the will to conquer the mountains, resolve to make peace. Representatives first go to Cudjoe and the Leeward band with gifts and hostages. The terms of their proposal grant the Leeward Maroons ownership and authority over all the land around their settlements, 1,500 acres, and the right to hunt almost anywhere and trade in colonial towns. At last, freedom and safety. The price of this victory is that the Leeward Maroons must assist the British in putting down rebellions and invasions, and that from this moment on, any runaway slave who seeks refuge with or encounters the Maroons is to be captured and returned to the slaveholders. Cudjoe signs the treaty in 1739. Some of his men revolt at this apparent betrayal of the enslaved. They attempt to foment a rebellion on the plantations, but Cudjoe has the leaders of the plot arrested and personally oversees the executions of 2 of them. Next, the British go with beating drums and fanfare to the place of the Windward Maroons. Nanny's people have long held the British in contempt. One observer notes that their women wear necklaces strung with the teeth of His Majesty's subjects. But the prospect of war against both the British and Cudjoe's Maroons effectively forces them to sign a similar treaty. No longer can the enslaved look to the hills for liberation. The British have helped turn their old allies against them, and in so doing preserved the slave state. Ships arrive with appalling frequency. The number of enslaved people in Jamaica approaches 300,000 over the course of the century. The cry for freedom grows louder, but massive slave revolts are brutally suppressed with the aid of Maroon warriors. In 1791, the Haitian Revolution begins, a long and cataclysmic slave rebellion. Amidst fears of spreading revolt, British disputes with the Maroons of Cudjoe's old village, now called Trelawney Town, devolve into war in 1795. The other Maroon villages will not support Trelawney Town, but runaway slaves join the ranks of the rebels as they did generations ago. Lines of redcoats are decimated by guerrilla warfare. The British lose 70 men in around 2 months without a confirmed kill of their own. Only scorched earth tactics, burning crops and cutting down forest brush, force the Trelawney Maroons to accept peace. Yet many are slow to give themselves up, and the governor uses this as a pretext to take nearly all of the over 500 inhabitants of Trelawney Town and banish them. The first winter is one of the worst on record. Here in the north, the Maroons are resigned to ramshackle lodgings. For years, the Maroons petitioned the British government to permit them back to Jamaica, to no avail. In 1800, the British allowed them to settle in Sierra Leone, home to many formerly enslaved Africans. A large part of the Trelawney Maroons will remain there for the rest of their lives. But in the 1840s, after the British abolished slavery, some sail with their families to Jamaica. For the eldest among them, it's a return to the island of their childhood. An island of lush mountains where centuries-old maroon communities live on to this day. Conquer Spanish Hispaniola have come to take this sparsely populated island instead. Spain had claimed Jamaica in the days of Columbus, promptly enslaving the indigenous Taino people, as disease and maltreatment began to kill nearly, promptly enslaving the indigenous Taino people. As disease and maltreatment began to kill nearly all of this population, the Spaniards turned increasingly to enslaved Africans. In the chaos of the present invasion, these Africans
Hypixel released one of its biggest updates to Bed Wars, the pre-game name obfuscation update. Their goal was to ensure that players of all skill levels can enjoy the game on a more level playing field, claiming that Q dodging and sniping facilitated by player overlays and third-party programs have long been issues in the Bed Wars community. This update was widely controversial and received both positive and negative feedback from the community. Simply put, the update is far from perfect. As we're going on a year since this update came out, has it been beneficial or detrimental to the game? Let's recap and dive into it. As the game got more popular over the years, a new strategy became prominent: overlays. Thousands of players began downloading this external software, which gave them loads of information when they queued into a game. They could see players' live stats like Bed Wars level, wins, kills, KDR, and so much more. And with that information, they could then make a snap decision: play the game or re-queue and find a different lobby. If there are high-level players or known specs, they could then leave and fish for easier lobbies with newer or casual players. What about these casual players? Well, they were in the dark. They don't have the same information as overlay users, and many aren't even aware that overlays exist, since Hypixel doesn't even mention it, and you have to go outside the game in order to download it. Wait, hold on, Jay. Overlays are good for avoiding hackers and snipers. Why are you acting like every overlay user intentionally targets noobs? Look, I know some people use overlays to avoid snipers and cheaters, and that's a big criticism people had with the update. And I will get into that soon, but it still doesn't excuse the fact that so many players using overlays created a serious imbalance in the game that ultimately hurt new players. Overlay users could cherry pick easy lobbies, dodge difficult ones, and grind stats without ever dealing with real challenges. Meanwhile, unsuspecting players became part of that cycle, targeted for easy kills, farmed for win streaks, and likely having no idea why they kept running into the same impossible games over and over again. Now, this does not mean that the update was perfect. It definitely had a ton of flaws. The obfuscation update dropped suddenly, and just like that, overlays were rendered useless in pre-game lobbies, and Q dodging was no longer possible. A lot of players were upset, and the Hypixel forums blew up overnight. A lot of the early backlash was from the other change that came with this update: stars-based matchmaking. There had always been soft matchmaking in the game, with levels 1 to 15 having their own separate queue. Now there are 3 brackets: new players level 1 to 10, slightly less new players level 10 to 50, and everyone else level 50 plus. There was a lot of confusion surrounding this, and many players claim that they're experiencing sweaty games with a dramatic increase in high-level players. Some even claim that every game they played only had 400 plus star players. Since then, it seems like the backlash caused them to fix the bugginess and maybe even adjust the queue in general, since today, as a level 1000, I've been able to queue and play games with several low star players, even as low as level 15, level 20, and so on. So back then, staff could have definitely communicated better with the player base and rolled out the update more smoothly. For obfuscation, players still had a lot of concerns. Yes, sniping is still possible, but it's far less damaging now. API settings were added to allow players to freeze their stats while they're online. Previously, snipers were able to track player data to deduce when and where a player is queuing, and now it is far more challenging. I saw a lot of people saying players were going to toggle hacks in order to get an advantage to fill in the void that overlays left, but I'm not so sure this is as big as people are making it. There was a lot of panic right after the update came out, and now things are much better. But day one, people were dealing with a lot of bugs and were concerned about extremely sweaty games, even to the point that players said they would start hacking. Now, to that I say, if you need an overlay in order to get a leg up on other players, that's a problem with you, and you're going to have to get used to playing Bed Wars normally without avoiding tough competition. I feel it's a while since the update came out, bugs are mostly smoothed over, and the community is used to playing like this now. It's funny because this reminds me of how people say bring back the old Bed Wars. Meanwhile, back when Bed Wars was first released in the prototype lobby, overlays didn't exist, and everyone was on the same level playing field. Of course, the community is very different now with the growing problems of cheaters and poor moderation, but that doesn't warrant abusing overlays. And that brings me to another concern that was raised was how overlays were helpful for dodging snipers or hackers, and even just seeing player names in the pre-game lobbies allowed normal players to avoid a cheater that they just ran into. First, about overlays. Some overlays had features to allow users to flag a cheater or a sniper account, which gave players with overlays access to a whole web of knowledge that others didn't have. And I think this system is still arguably unfair, since a majority of Bed Wars players do not use overlays. but the fact that players cannot avoid cheaters anymore by recognizing their name in the pregame lobby is definitely an issue. Now, I can confidently say that this is not as big of an issue, for me at least. Usually when someone is hacking and sniping, I can just random queue and avoid them. I probably ran into the same cheater like 2 games in a row, only once in the past year, but in general, I think a lot of the problems with this update can be attributed to a moderation system that just falls short. Now, according to Plank, Hypixel's anti-cheat bans players quite often, almost at 10 million all-time bans, with the system handing out thousands of daily bans. We will never truly know the inner workings of the anti-cheat, but we can only assume that these numbers come from obvious hacks. I'm talking hacks like scaffold, bee-hopping, and even flying across the map. But there are known hacks that seem to fly under the radar, such as blinking, intentionally lagging yourself mid-fight in order to get an advantage, tracers being able to detect invisible players no matter where they are, bed nuker being able to break beds through blocks, and even anti-KB, which allows players to reduce or cancel their knockback. Players toggle these hacks in specific moments, and I've reported dozens of players for this, and I can confidently say that most of these reports go unresolved. There is a clear issue with the moderation system. On May 31st, 2021, a new rank was introduced, the Game Master. This was a paid position that replaced the volunteer staff team, and the moderator and helper ranks were completely removed. They claimed that the staff to player ratio might be small, but the amount of work that each Game Master is able to do and will be able to do is quite huge. It balances out at the end of the day, if not exceeding it. Players quickly raised concerns about how a smaller team would lead to less community engagement and generally a bad moderation system. And while these Game Masters might be doing work behind the scenes, the issue here is we don't know. We rarely see staff anymore. Back then, it was common for helpers and mods to linger in lobbies and talk with players, but today, a staff spotting is a rare treasure, and interacting with them personally, not going to happen. There's also a big lack of transparency with what these staff members do on a daily basis. I've had friends tell me that back when there were volunteer staff, if they had a hacker in their game, they were able to message a staff member in a lobby and usually someone got right on it. But this makes me wonder, is the current staff team even spectating games anymore? We assume not, or at least it's gone down significantly after transitioning to a smaller paid team. We can see this with Castles, a game of 40v40 players which rotates in every few weeks. Cheating in this game mode is a much bigger problem since it affects so many more players. Castles today is so filled with hackers and team griefers to the point that some are present game after game with no sign of punishment. Some team griefers even openly brag about doing this for years without ever being punished. This makes players wonder if the staff team is focusing too much on automation through Watchdog, the report system, and even Atlas reviews. And the problem here is, the current report system is not enough. While previously players were able to report people on the forums, the modern day report system is strictly in-game and very broad. You are not able to specify the type of hack, which means the reports are given to staff and players in Atlas without any context. Atlas is a system on Hypixel where players can watch replays of suspected cheaters and determine whether or not they're hacking. The problem is, the reviewer gets no information about the type of hack, the timestamp of the report, and the player who reported them in the first place. All you see is player followed by a number, and then the suspect, and that's it. Some Atlas replays are as long as 50 minutes, and it becomes difficult and time-consuming to determine whether a player is innocent or just being very careful. When Atlas was introduced, it was first described as a way for players to help staff. And if staff use data from these Atlas replays when making their verdicts, it will ultimately lead to a huge level of bias, because most Atlas reviewers will not have the context or the energy to make the right decision, especially when it comes to not so obvious cheaters. With Hypixel staff using Atlas as a means to streamline their process, it is very concerning. The reason that some players complain about the obfuscation update is because the report system and moderation system is just not equipped enough to deal with these cheaters, so players had to previously moderate games themselves by Q-dodging cheaters and even using overlays to better detect them. But we honestly shouldn't have to do that. Hackers are a problem that everyone has to deal with and has dealt with for years, and claiming that overlays were your only line of defense and therefore a beneficial tool is just wrong, given that the usage of overlays significantly hurt the game for so many players. So the final chapter, is the update good or bad? Well, that's a question you'll have to answer yourself, but for me, I've been playing for years and never used overlays, and honestly, this update has had a positive impact on my experience playing the game. Queuing into games is so much faster since players aren't dodging constantly, and I feel like I don't get targeted as much. If the game wants to grow, we need to move on from the days of overlays, and continue to give new players a cushion to learn the game and really enjoy it. So what now? Well, Hypixel staff should continue to improve the moderation system, strengthen the anti-cheat, and start engaging more with the community. I've been playing this game for 8 whole years, and I really want to see it succeed. And it's up to all of us to voice our concerns to really make Bed Wars the best it can be. This is actually my first real video, so if you enjoyed it, please leave a like, and feel free to comment your thoughts on the update. I also linked a Hypixel forums post in the description of this video if you want to get involved in the conversation. Well, that's all for now. Thanks for watching.
Coming to you.
Fireball.
No! No! No!
Jay?
No! No! No!
Wait, it lands.
Oh.
It landed.
Oh my god.
You are so lucky.
What the hell, dude?
So unbelievably lucky.
Hi everyone, if you didn't know, last August was the 2024 GMTK Game Jam. It was one of the biggest game jams of all time. Over 32,000 developers competed, submitting over 7,600 games. One of those developers was me, and this year I somehow won the entire jam. This is the story of how that happened. Oh, wait, if you don't know what a game jam is, it's an event where lots of game developers get together to make games centered around a theme in a really short time span. Usually afterwards, everyone plays and rates each other's games. For the GMTK Jam, the top 100 rated games are then played by Mark Brown from GMTK, from which he picks 20 games as the official winners of the jam. It's a great time every year, and a great way to get better at game dev. I have a bit of a history with the GMTK Game Jam, though. The first game jam I ever joined was GMTK 2020, which was only a week after I'd released